Welcome to the Food Professor Podcast, episode number 30. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Sylvain Charlebois.
Well, in this episode, it is part one of our interview with President and CEO of Retail Council of Canada, Diane Brisebois. So, as we've mentioned on prior episodes, this kind of balance we've got as we kind of wrap up the spring season, so to speak. Then we're going on a bit of a hiatus, is between the people who make the product and the people who sell the product broadly. And Michael Graydon, past two episodes were really great, learning about the organization, his perspective on the code of conduct. And now we have equal time, so to speak, with Diane Brisebois, who represents, retailers from coast to coast of all formats, including the grocers. So it's a great interview. This part one is about, how do you do advocacy in a pandemic? We've got, we really get into that part from the retailer perspective. And then part two, which will be our last episode live together until the fall, is all about the code of conduct. That gets really interesting. So it was a real treat. And thank you for inviting Diane and Michael. So I think it made some great listening.
I think we need to give a lot of credit to both for participating. I think both of them are great leaders for their own industries. They're great ambassadors, and so we were very lucky, I think, to have both them on to talk about this very important issue.
Yeah, and it was a good, fulsome conversation too. Lots of energy. Great for the community to listen to. So anyway, just in case you're watching this on YouTube or whatever, listening, be sure and check those episodes when you're on the dock or relaxing over the summer, or where you are at your cottage in your.
I am, yes, which is known as paradise for us.
Well,
in Saint-Sauveur, Quebec.
Very nice, have
you ever been to Saint-Sauveur, Michael?
No, most of my time in Quebec has been in the Outaouais because I was born and raised in Ottawa. So kind of from there, between there and Montreal.
Well, the Outaouais is about an hour and a half away from Saint-Sauveur. And most people in Ottawa will think about Tremblant, but they never think about an hour south of Tremblant, which is Saint-Sauveur. And in Saint-Sauveur, you got everything. You got an aqua park, you got golf, you got biking trails. You have, in the winter, obviously, we're off the slope here, so we can actually leave from our cottage on skis, if you can believe it. Oh, yeah, directly. Just basically ski over, you ski down, you buy your tickets, off you go. It's awesome. Saint-Sauveur is just an awesome place.
All right, so for the listeners or the viewers out there, if you still haven't made some plans and you're deciding you're going to travel, thankfully, with the vaccination, there's your destination. There's your place.
You can call your travel agent, Sylvain Charlebois. I'll help you out with that one.
Tell Sylvain. All right, let's. We got a great episode, as I said today, with interview with Diane Brisebois. But a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about. So I was interested. Let's start with Maple Leaf buying farms, pig farms, and it's kind of an interesting way to backward integrate or backyard integrate, I could say. But I was kind of surprised at it. Does it say to me, or does it say to you that they're a little worried about the supply, or is it just a business decision to get back from processing and marketing backwards into the actual raising? It seemed a different stretch to me, but maybe it's just a different category and I'm overthinking it.
I think you're reading it right. I think it's more about control. And I think the one thing we've learned from the pandemic is that a lot of things can happen in processing. And I suspect that, and Maple Leaf has invested heavily in processing the last recent years. You think of Hamilton, for example, the mega plant there, the mega hog plant. They're investing in London now. They're building a mega plant for chicken. So they've invested quite a bit. Brandon is 20 years old already. The Maple Leaf plant. So it was an interesting move for Maple Leaf. I honestly, like you, I wasn't expecting it, but once I heard about it, I wasn't overly surprised. So that's how I saw it. Yeah. Did you see it the same way?
Yeah, I thought the timing was interesting, given the supply and maybe that, the demand for one of the is pork demand up, down, or sideways. We know that China is still consuming a tremendous amount of the global pork as they rebuild their pork inventory, basically right after their porcine pandemic. So no, I thought it was interesting. Maple Leaf, we've talked about them a bunch of times on the podcast. Such a well run company. So when they do something, it always gets my attention because I know how professional they are, and I just start thinking about what they're thinking, basically.
Oh yeah,
So
no.
you know,
When it comes to processing, I actually would say that Maple Leaf is a top tier company in Canada for sure. In the last 5 years, they do value processing quite a bit. Now, the on the demand side, pork is still quite popular. I mean, pork is actually still selling well retail
mm,
in Canada. It is an affordable animal protein. If people
yeah,
are spooked by beef, they'll go towards pork. And so that's why pork demand has been quite stable and has
mm,
risen a little bit the last few years. So it's a good investment overall.
yeah.
With beef, though, things are, on the international side of things are good, but domestically, as you know, Michael, demand per capita is still dropping. It's been dropping for the last 30 years.
Is it the case of the trifecta, as you've called it, of the proteins, that it's chicken, then pork, then beef in terms of consumption in Canada? Is that fair to say in terms of just in terms of
Pretty
volume?
much, both chicken and pork have done very well in recent years. Although I'm a little
Mm.
bit concerned about chicken. You see, chicken typically would increase by 2-3% a year. This year, it's 8 since
And
January.
and for many families, it's the more economical choice of the
Oh
three,
yeah.
right? Right.
So, and chicken is like the tide. If the tide rises, everything else rises at the meat counter. And
Oh,
that's a bit
interesting.
of a problem for butchers and
Mm,
and people managing meat counters in Canada. If
mm.
chicken goes up, everything else goes up. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how people react with higher prices at the meat counter over the next little while.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, let's talk about government intervention and what we are marketed to, or how we are marketed to. So we get two things that caught my attention. First of all, I saw put out a note about Britain, who's been one of the world's leaders in terms of controlling high fat, high sugar advertisements to its
Yep.
people. And at the same time, you've talked about you're not a fan of the Who, I guess, because the kids aren't all right. Kids are all right. Favorite Who album.
Hmm.
That you're
That's
saying,
right.
listen, the marketing to kids piece. So
Thank you
these two
for
things,
noticing.
yeah. So these two things are connected. How are they connected in your mind? Britain, on the one hand, is taking a very forward perspective on not allowing any advertising on certain products, and the Canadian government is considering marketing to kid rules about what and how and where foods can be advertised. So where do those two things meet in your mind, between concerns about overreach, government overreach, versus making sure that the population stays healthy? Where do those things set in your mind?
Well, first of all, I think everyone would agree that it's important to protect our children. I mean, that's the most important thing, and there is science to the fact that kids can be influenced by marketing. They will be, and there's enough science. We know that. At the same time, I'm also concerned about overreach. And in the case of England, it is an island country. Most people in England will consume English content. Now, the regulation is kind of sketchy. It looks at daytime advertisement. What does that mean on TV? On top of it, so I'm not sure exactly what that means. Especially nowadays when most kids don't consume media or information from a television set. They
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
do that through social media
YouTube,
and
watch it on
and
YouTube
on
or
the
whatever. Yeah.
internet, and that's really tough to regulate. Many countries have actually have tried to regulate content on the internet, including Canada with Bill
Recently.
C-10, which is
Yeah,
likely to die because of an election. And
yeah.
I'm honestly a bit concerned by overreach, having the state controlling everything. Quebec
Mm,
actually has done it since 1980. And what they've figured out is that Quebecers don't necessarily consume media from Quebec, or they won't
Sure.
necessarily listen only shows from Quebec. They listen to shows from the United States and from other places in Canada as well. And so advertising is everywhere. So it's hard to control. And that's why in my piece, I actually do value the concept of education. I think it's important to recognize that parents do have a role to play. They're the ones buying the products at the end of the day. And so it's important for them to understand the risks. At the same time, FHCP just released a voluntary code for themselves, advertisers, supported by key associations in Canada. I
Hmm.
thought it was actually a good move from them because they see that the writing is on the wall. Eventually, after an election, this concept of regulating advertising to children won't go away. A lot of people in Canada are concerned about that, so it's not going to go away. So they're
Hmm.
slowly preparing themselves. So my position on this is pretty simple. Just give this voluntary code a chance and see what happens by 2023, because it'll be fully implemented by 2023. Beyond that, if we see clear results, that's great. If we don't, then perhaps we should reconsider. What did you think about that?
Well, the M2K, as it's kind of known, has
Yeah,
been around for a while, and on the one hand, of course, we all care about our children. I love your tact about education because I think education is more powerful than regulation.
yeah,
And sometimes unintended consequences we often talk about with the advocates. You wind up saying, well, you can't promote the Easter Bunny. Like if you took black letter law that said headline, Trudeau government kills the Easter Bunny. Sometimes sometimes the rules as written get a bit get a
that's
bit
right.
awry, and I think that's where the associations like Retail Council of Canada, like Michael Graydon's association, come in and say, okay, let's find some balance, let's figure out amongst us all the right way to go. Again, I'm a
I think
fan of.
it was a good move from the association to actually be in front of this and not just wait for
Oh
things
yeah,
to happen.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I know Retail Council has been thinking about, as they do many files, right? Some
Oh
of these
yeah.
got, and some of them had the pause button hit on them in the pandemic, right? Other priorities were took place for both governments and for the associations. Let's
It's
talk
funny
about.
if you
Go ahead.
remember last time we spoke, Michael. We talked about the sugar tax, which kind of fits in that same
Hmm.
registry, I guess. I'll have an op-ed at the end of the month in the Toronto Star about you know
Yeah.
I wrote a piece not supporting a sugar tax essentially,
Right.
and the editor called me and said, "Well, who do you think would write an op-ed against yours?" And
Hmm.
I basically said, talk to anyone in the medical sector,
Hmm.
dietitians, nutritionists. They fully believe that the state should regulate advertising, and I understand why, because, like I said, there is science, there is some neuroscience
Yeah.
which would support such a position.
Yeah.
But at the same time, what where there's some disagreement is how do you protect children in the end, really?
Right. Interesting. All right. Well, obviously, in the sugar tax, for the listeners or the viewers who hadn't heard, we talked about that in Newfoundland, right? They were going to pass a sugar
That's
tax,
right. Yeah.
um, but we'll keep a close eye on that one. You wrote an article recently in Retail Insider around some concerns around for the grocers community around
Yes.
demographic changes. It kind of surprised me a little bit at the headline, because I was thinking, my God, they've had the tailwind of all tailwinds with the pandemic and the shift.
That's
And I
right.
guess the multi-billion-dollar question is how consumers change their behaviors and what sticks and what does not. So what's your perspective? What's your feeling around demographic shifts and grocers?
Well, I don't know if you've actually looked at some recent data coming from StatsCan about our population, but things aren't looking good.
Hmm.
I mean, grocers. When you look at the grocery industry in Canada, they heavily the sector heavily relies on demographic growth to support
Sure.
their own growth strategy. That's if you have more
Yep.
mouths to feed, it's easier to actually achieve a 2-3% growth every single year. But because of COVID, we're actually seeing fewer immigrants. We were
Right.
short on our target last year. We're likely going to be short again this year in 2021. And because our birth rate is lower than 2.1, which would be the rate that would allow us
Replenish the
to
population.
replace
Yeah.
ourselves, I guess. Uh, right now, the birth rate in Canada is at about 1.71. Now, according to the UN, and based on some of the analysis that they've conducted for each and every industrialized countries, Canada's birth rate could drop by 4% to 1.51 by 2026.
Hmm.
And the rationale makes sense to me when you think about what has happened with COVID and the younger generations. I mean, basically, COVID will force a lot of people, a lot of younger folks, to wait and start to. They had to wait and to start their careers. So they're gonna have to focus on their careers, launch their careers before settling down and start a family, which makes total sense. If you talk to any recent university graduates, they'll tell you exactly that. Well, I'm not going to settle down now. I mean, I'm a few years behind
Yeah.
now, so I need to
Need a bit
catch
of
up.
runway. Yeah. Need a bit of runway. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I totally get it. And that's going to probably cost, and which is why we believe that our birth rate will go down. And you saw already, because of COVID, our birth rate has gone down already. And
Yeah.
so I'm a bit concerned about that, because I suspect that the Canadian population will continue to grow, but not as fast as it used to. Are you surprised by that?
I don't know if I'm surprised. I think I'm more sanguine because I think there's a public policy superpower that is lying in wait to change things. So first of all, I did get into this discussion with someone around birth rates and marriage
Right.
rates during COVID, and I'm like,
Yes.
of course, it's not the best time during a global pandemic to get married or to have children.
That's
However, I
right.
think there'll be pent up demand for both. I mean, listen, as a young person, it's hard to meet people
So
during a
you're
pandemic.
expecting a baby boom like in the 40s.
I don't know if it's going to be like the 40s. People were a bit surprised it didn't happen during the COVID era. I wasn't surprised at all because who wants to be in a hospital? Because having children, as you know, means trips to the hospital, both before they're born and
I got to
after.
tell you, Michael, I heard so many experts 18 months ago telling us, "Oh, there's going to be a pandemic baby boom."
No, I
And I
didn't think so.
wondered, I don't know. And
Post pandemic,
post pandemic, perhaps. I'm
I think.
still a little bit skeptical because of the economics of starting a
Uh,
family. I mean, it's pretty darn expensive now.
Well, well. Let's talk about this policy superpower. Now, we got an election coming up. Who knows? It'll come up. We've got two things that replenish the population, as you said. Immigration. We got great immigration policies in this country. 300,000, I think, is a total. So that'll resume in the fullness of time. The other one, and I think Quebec has been a leader on this, is how do we help families have children with daycare? Right, with
Hmm.
subsidized daycare. So if you talk to the average Canadian family, can there be whatever way it is, whether it's given money to the families or subsidized daycare, if you release the burden of trying to find, like if you live in Toronto, trying to find great daycare, expensive and difficult, right? So it is an
Hmm.
impediment on having children or many children or whatever you may personally want to do. So I think it's a superpower. I think it's, if you want to replenish the domestic population, listen, I'm sounding like a farmer here, replenish the population. Um, if you if
Farmer
you want,
Michael.
yeah, exactly. Anyway, so I'm more sanguine about it because there's an opportunity there. I mean, there's a financial
I
barrier.
mean, the daycare argument is, I think, it's long overdue. I actually do think that we need universal daycare, but I am from Quebec, and I know that there are some limitations to universal daycare. The challenge is, if you are to set up a program across Canada, great. Make sure everyone has access to it. That's the thing, because
Yeah,
if and I know when I started my career, I we were raising a family, and we didn't have a spot for our son, and so you ended up paying for a system as a taxpayer that you didn't have access to. And so that's really the big challenge. I think universal daycare, absolutely for everyone. I think everyone wins, but we should make sure that everyone has a spot. And if you actually have a very reliable system,
Yeah.
then people will have babies, and our population, our birth rate will go up.
Yeah, I think it doesn't have to be either or, immigration versus domestic growth in the population. I think it can be both with clever policy, well executed. Yeah, listen, we got through the pandemic. Let's
I think
let's
we should start a
you know,
new party, Michael.
I
We
think
should
so.
start, call let's make Canadians.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Let's have babies,
Yeah, so let's have babies party.
Let's increase our population party, or have
Listen,
one item on our platform, and that's it. But
listen, it's one of the best strategies for retailers, right?
some of our
Retailers need more
governments will say
customers.
the worst thing you can do to the environment is have babies. So we'll have
Well,
our work cut out for us.
well, I think you can have your cake and eat it too. Is my perspective. Just to stay in the food realm. All right, listen, let's take a minute now and let's bring Diane Brisebois on our interview, first part of our interview with Diane. Let's bring that on now. And so for the YouTube viewers, you won't see that interview, but for those, check out the podcast. Fantastic interview, part 1. And we're back on the YouTube channel. And listen, we won't talk too much about the interview. It was a great interview. People can listen to it. But Diane is such a both so well respected. I've known Diane since the late '90s, 20 plus years.
Yeah.
Worked with her, worked for her. So much respect, and she's done
But
such a
she's
great.
respected because she's telling it like it is.
Yeah.
And it has worked for her. It has worked for RCC as well. So I'm really glad that she was able to share some time with us.
Yeah, it really was. It really was a treat. All right, so listen, this will be a shorter episode. We had a great interview with Diane. We'll chop that together for the listeners and viewers. We have one more episode left for this season, so to speak, part 2 of the episode with Diane, and then we come back in September with an interview with Serge Boulanger from Metro, which is a fantastic interview. You talk about a man who spent his life and career in a grocer serving customers. So it's a great perspective to listen to Serge. And then in between, we've got lots of more interviews with Canadian Grand Prix finalists and winners to play. We've got Jenny Longo. We've got all kinds of brands to come up. We've got the woman who runs cheese at Lactalis, talks about how they develop the product. Right. So we got lots of episodes to keep you entertained on the dock or in the curb.
And hopefully one day we'll start testing food products.
That's right.
You and I will. Yes, looking forward to that.
We're looking forward to that. All right. So a reminder then to everybody who's listening about our YouTube channel, where you can watch the entire episode or upload digestible content segments. And again, lots of great interviews to come over the summer to keep you entertained. And if you liked what you heard, you can follow us on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, your favorite podcast platform. Please rate and review. Be sure to recommend to a friend or colleague in the grocery, food service, or restaurant industry. I'm Michael LeBlanc, producer and host of all new Conversations with Commerce Next podcast. Check that one out, and a bunch of other stuff. And
I'm Sylvain Charlebois.
All right. Thanks, Sylvain. Have a wonderful and safe couple of weeks. We'll talk to you again in a couple of weeks. Enjoy your time at the cottage with the family, and we'll reconnect real soon.
Take care, Michael.